I should be covering quite a wide area of the papers, as you would expect. I would first of all like to thank the officers, especially the finance team and Kevin Hasey, and also the governance and risk team and Julian Geller for all their help with the budget process. It has not been a straightforward process this year, with 5 sets of budget papers, all pages numbered differently, and all with some elements changed. Not helped by getting the final full set of papers only last Wednesday. Also not helped by the shambolic way this government has presented the budget figures to local government, with the officers still not knowing the exact settlement figures. As I've already said at scrutiny in Cabinet, I do not like the lack of detail of any of the cuts to services. I can accept that this budget is more strategic, and strategic salami slicing is slightly better than the general salami slicing that we have seen in the past 7 years. But this budget still shows a real lack of strategic thinking and decisive decision-making. The report from the Section 151 officer, which is Agenda Item 6, page 51, sets out that the estimates used are adequately robust, and that the level of resources, contingencies and balances for the coming financial year are adequate. And page 58 shows the predicted reserves position at the end of March 2017 and are stated to be close to required levels. The accepted norm in general reserves is £15 million. It is no wonder that the recommendation at paragraph 2.2-7 on page 63 says, whilst the Council is able to present a balanced budget for 2017-18, it is on the basis that all targets, including against each MTFP theme, are achieved. This is repeated on page 80 with recommendation number 8. I would also like to read out the third paragraph of 4.1, implications, on page 64. The obligation to make a lawful budget each year is shared equally by each individual member. In discharging that obligation, members owe a fiduciary duty to the council taxpayer. At the Cabinet meeting last Monday, we had the out-turn figures for Q3, and to balance the books, the Cabinet had to transfer £13.5 million to fill the black hole. This money came from capital reserves and general reserves, and was used to pay for the massive overspend this year so far, and the failure of the last budget. These transfers from reserves are set out in brief on page 326, if you'd like to have a look. This is a real failure by the Cabinet and just cannot happen again. Indeed, there is no money left. We know it is getting even harder to find savings. The last couple of years have seen only 62% and 60% of planned savings achieved overall. We do know roughly where the axe will fall hardest, and that appears to be within the service redesign theme, with learning disabilities, mental health services and children's services, which are on pages 172 to 176, all bearing the lion's share of the cuts, a total of £10.2 million. Page 84, of course, sets out all the savings projections over the next 4 years. It is a 4-year plan, not a 3-year plan. If we then look in detail at service redesign, the hundreds of clients using our learning disability service are amongst the most vulnerable people in Somerset. The 1,200 staff who care for them are totally dedicated and professional. It looks as though it will be calm and service without walls. Indeed, it will be when all the day centres are closed. Our mental health services in Somerset are some of the poorest in the UK, with our children's mental health service, CAMS, the lowest funded in England. It needs investment, not more cuts. Is it any wonder that our children's services are deemed inadequate by Ofsted, and we are now in the 5th year of being inadequate? When you took control almost 8 years ago, the services were up with the best, a 5-star service. You have destroyed that reputation and have destroyed the prevention services that underpin everything. You are proposing further huge cuts from the children's services, but no detail as to how that will be achieved. This is dangerous stuff. The last sentence of the second paragraph on page 176, you can turn to that if you like, sums up this budget. And I'll quote, "We want to reduce the number of children placed in out-of-county provision." End of quotes. Yes, we all want to do that, but there is just no substance in that, no sensible way forward, no plan for the future. The technology and people fee must save £2 million, which is set out on pages 103 to 117. We read on page 105 that the end of the South West 1 contract will save £1.5 million for the County Council. It is a pity that the lack of strategic purchasing of the WAN network for our Somerset schools will cost the schools an extra £2.5 million a year, money that they can ill afford. We need this team to look hard at better services for schools, using technology to save money, not cost our children their teachers. We should also be looking at the investment in good software systems for our social workers after years of neglect. That would definitely help getting things more efficient. The productivity and culture fee proposal is to save only £392,000 in the next year, which you can see set out on pages 119 to 138. This includes the agency staff spend. At Cabinet, and again this morning, Francis has put forward the argument that having some locums are good for flexibility, and I accept that. But a target of only £392,000 for this scheme is incredibly low. As members will be aware, I have challenged the figures on table 2 on page 125, which is the agency spend over a 2-year period. And we had an FOI response covering the past 4 years and showing an increasing problem, with a maximum of over £16 million spent a year, including VAT. I can accept that the real figure ex VAT is £12 million, of which children's services are £7 million. But with a markup of 40% on locum payments, as set out on page 125, halfway down, we are looking here at a possible £2.8 million saving. To be offered £392,000 and then £322,000 a year following is only 25% in all of the possible savings over the 2 years. We would like this target for agency fees to be raised to £1 million for each year 2017, 2018 and 2018-19. If we look at the other £5 million of agency spend, the markup is much less. But nevertheless, there is a markup of 10%, we believe, on average, on that £5 million. And that still gives another saving of £500,000, which could come in. There are also savings possible on shared services, especially with the NHS. I know that the disability grant in district councils is underspent, and there is scope for better and more efficient services by better joined-up working. The commercial and third-party fee proposed to save £2.796 million, a very exact figure, and if you would like to look at that, it's on pages 139 to 145 for details. This theme is looking at procurement opportunities, and I have already mentioned the possible missed opportunity with our schools' WAN network. But much more could be done here to increase income. To show only £40,000 on page 143 from income and trading is dire. I just do not think the Cabinet have the will to make it happen. I know, however, that our officers do have that will. The transport fee is proposing savings of 2.113 million. See pages 183 to 196. Again, exact figures, with most of that so-called saving being the money not spent on concessionary fares. People cannot use their concessionary cards if the services no longer exists. We need many more community transport schemes, and we need investment in those schemes. Throughout these budget papers, we have no specific impact assessments. No doubt they will appear in due course at the next couple of Cabinet meetings as decisions are finally revealed to us and the council taxpayers. The high-level theme impact assessments are very high level indeed, with no detail. A good example of that being on pages 179 to 181. I do not think that anyone, possibly other than the Cabinet members, really know where the facts, the axe, will finally fall. And even the Cabinet are not saying for fear of being found out. We on this side do have good ideas. We do take this process very seriously indeed, and expect to be listened to. I must say that I find it unhelpful at Cabinet when the leader, instead of listening, filmed me. And that, Harvey, is why I haven't come back to you, because I knew you had a film last Wednesday. We then see fake news appearing on Tory websites, Facebook and Twitter pages. I think that respect should be given to all members, not the spreading of misinformation. As anyone who was at the Cabinet meeting knows, what I actually said was that Tory-run Surrey Council proposed a 15% rise and were planning to have a referendum to push it through. I was told the Cabinet here had not even contemplated this sort of action, this when it was an obvious ploy. We then discover that the government intervened and gave Surrey an extra grant. It certainly was Conservative policy until last Wednesday to increase council tax by 15%. Why should it be Surrey getting to do a business rates trial? Why should they get yet more money and not Somerset? Especially when they already get more government money than us. We are always very happy to work on a cross-party basis, so why can't John Osmond get a much better settlement from government? Well, we know the real answer to that, don't we? It is because when the government takes a close look at Somerset, they will look aghast at the spending of over £16 million a year on agency staff and over £15 million on so-called smart offices, and collecting the only flood taxes in the UK from our residents. This instead of improving services to our vulnerable residents. As well as that, the government has given the Cabinet an opportunity to partially fill the financial black hole with an increase of 3% instead of 2% on the social care element, which they have bottled. That's why you currently can't get more government money, because you are a shambles. The very general way of presentation of this budget gives the Cabinet yet more time to decide what to do, but they have less than 9 weeks to firm up that budget. After that, it will be too late for them. I have not yet commented on the capital or the Treasury papers, but would ask you to bear in mind that the government has borrowed at least £500 million over the past 8 years to give grants to this administration. This is part of the growing national debt. I do not think that money has been invested wisely. I have also not commented on the consultation paper, but we have done our own very well supported consultation, and the results of that are well known. Alarmingly, 50% of residents who completed our survey were very concerned with the fact that Conservative-led Somerset County Council had failed to turn around the children's services since being found inadequate in 2013. With more than 1,000 days past first been deemed inadequate, local residents feel this lack of progress is simply not acceptable. Local residents were similarly concerned by the fact that the Conservative administration were having to rely so heavily on agency staff, with 80% saying they thought up to £12 million spent per year being too much. When asked about the different councils in South Somerset, the difference in the public's attitude was clear. 64% rated Conservative-led Somerset County Council as poor or very poor, whereas Liberal Democrat-led South Somerset District Council received 78% good or very good. The contrast is stark. Some of the terrible details are now starting to emerge, and it looks as though the outcome to Dimensions UK Limited of our learning disability service transfer will be a very sharp exercise indeed, designed to cut costs, to cut the 1,200 staff, their income and the services. Services to the most vulnerable people in Somerset. This budget highlights the disgraceful Conservative financial mismanagement over the past 8 years. We now see the chaos and sheer financial incompetence of this Conservative cabinet. I would call on all members on both sides to vote against this budget and bear in mind the implications set out on page 64, which I have already read out. We do owe a fiduciary duty to the council taxpayers. It is impossible to present an alternative budget on the flimsy, no substance figures as presented by John Osmond today. Thank you very much indeed for listening.